what I always tell owners is if someone works in your business and you don't know how to do their job, that's bad. Because what happens when they quit, right? Like the day, and we all know in hospitality, 2 weeks notice happens sometimes. Fuck you, I'm leaving in the middle of Friday night happens often too.
Thank you for listening to Serves You Right. My name is Andrew, and today we're talking to Chris Schneider of the Bar Business Coach. Have you ever thought, maybe one day I'll open a bar? Well, Chris would be the person to talk to. Chris talks to a lot of people who have that same thought, and he gives them a little bit of advice, a little bit, let's call it a dash of reality, and he helps people through every stage of the process. He's done it before. He knows all the secrets. He knows where the bodies are buried. So super fascinating conversation. We get into what it would actually look like if I were to open a bar, and I really enjoyed it. So without any further ado, here is Chris Schneider, and this is Serves You Right. Well, hi, Chris Schneider, thank you for coming on and talking to us today on Serves You Right.
Well, thanks for having me, Andrew. I really appreciate being here and having the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners.
For sure. So I thought it'd be good to start off today. You help people get into the bar business, own their own bars. A lot of our listeners probably have that dream, but most of the people that listen to this show, while they might dream about that, may never end in that position. But everyone listening has a boss, has someone they answer to, has a manager they deal with day to day. And I thought we could start by talking about, how do you know if you're working for the right guy or gal? Like, are there signs, things to run away from? Take that ball and run with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a hard one, right? Because when we think about hospitality, fortunately, I feel like a lot of times we're an industry of really good bosses and really crap bosses, right? And a lot of times you don't have many people that fall in that kind of that mediocre middle category. Obviously you do, but all the stories people tell, right, are about the very best and the very worst.
Everything that people remember, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and so fundamentally, there are definitely some differences there, though, that people can look for. And some of them are, quite frankly, a little bit generational. Some of them are a little bit just kind of about attitude towards things. And when I say generational, because I know there's probably some baby boomers, some Gen X that are about to bite my head off for saying this, but I was talking with some guys earlier today, and we were talking about how hospitality has changed as far as what people expect. And what I mean by that is if you think 20 years ago, if you were in the industry, I remember being like a 16-year-old kid, getting done with work, and there's some girl topless on the bar, some dude doing body shots off of her, there's cocaine, there's all this stuff, and that was just like, oh, work's over. This is a normal end of the night. Now, obviously, that was a little bit of a crazy situation that one night in particular, but 20, 30 years ago, if you walked into that and saw that, you would just kind of be like, yeah, that's weird, but whatever. Today, if you saw that, I'm pretty sure people would be getting canceled. It'd be all over social media. Right? Like the culture of what is acceptable has changed. And that's not a bad thing at all, right? I think it's actually a very, very good thing. We've become more professional, more inclusive, a lot better people generally in hospitality. But you still have a lot of folks around that came up in kind of that Wild West craziness that was the 80s and 90s that have not fully adapted to today. So I think that's the first thing to look for is kind of, are you working for someone that has that more old school mentality? Or are you working for someone that, okay, maybe they still have, all of us that were around back then, we have the memories, we have some things we probably enjoyed about it. But have you adapted over time so that, your manager, if you're an employee or if you're our manager, are you a walking HR case or not? I think that's the first thing to look at when we're talking about, are you working for somebody good or are you not working for someone good?
Sure. And I mean, that one way of putting it, are you a walking HR case, encapsulates quite a bit of bad behavior that could exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everything from, are you treating people right, all the way up to, are you sleeping with your employees? And a little bit of everything in between. Yeah.
And the fact, I mean, to an extent, you said everything up to, are you sleeping with your employees? Well, I don't know many industries where that's just a conversation people have and they're like, yeah, people do it, but you probably shouldn't. We are like the only industry that I'm aware of that it's like, okay, sometimes it happens, but you probably shouldn't do it. No, you just shouldn't do it, right? In
Yeah.
every other industry, that would just be an absolute no. And for some folks in ours, it's not quite an absolute no.
Yeah. I mean, how much is this just hospitality attracts such a strange and diverse set of people that you're going to get some extreme outliers and that's just part of, or is it just that people will get away with what they get away with and now that we have cell phones and there's easy reporting, people are getting away with less? Maybe that's a
I
better way
think
to
it's a
look at
little
it.
bit of both, right?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely hospitality, we're kind of a ragtag group of people. I did not come up with this, but if you think about people that are in hospitality, you have your transient folks that are kind of in and out. I'm bartending while I go through college. You have your people that are, I love hospitality and I want to be there forever. And I just love this industry and it's where my passion is. But a lot of folks, whether we're talking, bartenders, servers, or managers, are kind of in a third category that's default, where they're just, they were going to college, they got a degree, they were bartending, they never really got a job, they kept bartending, now they're the manager. And so they never really set out to be hospitality people. And so that's part of that kind of ragtag bunch we have that I think sometimes we don't always consider the fact that a lot of us probably never intended to be in hospitality our whole lives.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So you're like a bartender, you get good enough and you bartend for 20 years and then you maybe never really thought about it too hard, but now your arm hurts and they have the job open for a manager and you might as well because you're tired of carrying kegs. And then just like that,
Hmm.
you're in charge of a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds that look up to you and
Right.
you're the guy. Okay. Yeah.
And when you
Okay.
become that manager, right? If you're the owner over that manager, what's on the owner to have provided some training so that manager isn't a walking HR case. So that manager does know how to train people so that they do know what they're doing,
Hmm.
right? Because let's be honest, what you can get away with as a bartender is far different than what you can get away with as a manager, right?
Yes.
There's some growing up that has to happen in that process.
100%. If nothing else, I don't get call offs anymore. So
Right.
like my hangovers have to be a little bit less bad than they were because I
Yeah.
have to get to work or else the meat doesn't get ordered and then the
Right.
booze doesn't get ordered and all of a sudden you get a bar without any alcohol in it and people get mad. So
Hmm.
yeah. Okay. That's funny. Yeah. Because I was one of the ones in the camp that I intended to do this. I wasn't
Hmm.
transient. I actually started bar backing in college just to make some extra money and I fell in love with it. I thought this is what I'm doing. And that's what I've done from that point on. And so I forget that there are people who just kind of like, well, it's there. It's not good or bad. It's easy money and don't think about it.
Well, and I
Yeah.
had a number of bartenders work for me over the years where they went to school for something, bartended during college, got out, did that thing, and they're like, "Wait, I'm working like twice as much and I'm making less money. I'm just going to become a bartender again."
Hmm.
So sometimes it's not even just a unintentional thing, it's like a flip back to it because they realized, okay, what they thought they wanted to do is less fun and not as profitable as slinging drinks.
Yes. The lesser of two evils kind of. uh,
Yeah,
well, just so we don't only address that question from the negative
sure.
aspect, how do you know if you're working for the right person?
So I think the biggest thing to look for is how much are managers investing in their team,
Okay.
right? If you have a question and are managers giving their team the whys behind what's going on? It's one thing to say, hey, we're going to change the way that we do silverware and we used to do it this way. Now we're going to do it this way. I don't care what it is. But anytime you're doing that, if your manager is just saying, no, do this because I say so, that's all right. I mean, we can all put up with that to an extent. But if
At
it's
least
something you disagree with,
communication's happening. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that can be hard if you don't understand the why behind it. But if you have a manager that says, "Hey, we're changing the way we roll silverware because we were doing it this way and we're going to switch to this way. It's better for our customers and it saves us money." Okay, now they've actually gone that extra step of giving you a reason why. And so I like to look for people, if I was going to go work in the industry right now, people who will tell me why they're doing things. And also, when it comes to managers and owners, people that are open to ideas, right? Not necessarily that they do your idea, because let's be honest, I mean, you've managed, I've managed. Sometimes your servers have ideas that sound great on the surface, but
You
are
get some
not.
wild ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, oh, wouldn't it be great if, and you're just like, yeah, that would be wonderful, but that costs thousands of dollars on a night that we make $5. So I don't know how you want me to do that. But if you have a manager or an owner or somebody who's just completely not receptive to ideas, to me, that indicates that they're not trying to grow themselves. They're not trying to develop. And beyond that, they're not trying to develop the business.
Or they just really don't care about you at all.
Right.
Something, one of the two, and neither option's that great.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but when you see somebody who's explaining why, who's open to ideas, right? Those are two great green flags. Another one, really, to me, is the training programs. You
Mhm.
know, when you go into a place, I don't know how many of us have worked in bars and restaurants where the training program was, this is a POS system. Have you used one before? Yeah. Okay. It's the same as all the rest of them. Follow me for the night. Okay. Now you're on the floor. Right. You haven't learned shit. And so if you have a bar or a restaurant where they're providing you some training, it's showing that they value you more and that they understand, hey, the more you know, the more successful you are. And as a server or bartender, let's be real honest, the more successful you are, the better tips you're getting, the more money you're making the company too, because your sales are higher. So
Yep.
it's you the training to me shows that the ownership management, they understand that kind of copacetic relationship where you as a server or bartender succeed, and that makes the restaurant or bar succeed all the more.
For sure. Yeah. And I'm even thinking, if nothing else, just like a description, making you do some sort of like menu test, like
Yeah.
something, so that you're not just walking in and kind of ordering one item a day with your employee discount to try to figure out what's going on with the food across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're enjoying this so far, please take a second to take this podcast and share it with a friend. The only way we can grow is by people finding out through people who believe in us and love us like you. All right, back to the show.
Well, and even beyond just trying it, maybe let people know what's in it. Make sure your team knows what's in it, right? Make sure that people get allergies pointed out to them. Make sure that they get an idea of what can you substitute and what can't you substitute, right? Because what's worse than starting a new place and you say, oh, I want this with no mushrooms. You send it back to the kitchen. They're like, we made that sauce 3 days ago. Go screw yourself. And you're like, well, nobody told me that. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I think a good place is going to put in training almost every time.
Yeah. And before, I have one other question as we get into this, but
Sure.
I did want to highlight the other side of that. You do also weed out some of the people, ideally, that just don't care.
Right.
Because when you have those training programs and the people just don't invest. And what I thought of, I worked with this one guy, I won't say where, but we had a drink. It was essentially an infused spirit. That's what it was, on the rocks. So like, and it probably 3 times over the summer, he rang one in non-alcoholic. I think about this guy a lot, because it's just like every time I got that ticket, I was like, what do you want me to do? This just ice. Like there's nothing I can do with this drink. But he's like, no, you can't. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one time is training, right? The third time is just you're not listening. And that's,
Yeah.
I think if I were you, I probably would have become a little bit of an asshole and just put ice in a glass and set it on the bar and been like, there's your drink.
Yep. Good luck. So I was going to ask you, what got you into the bar business, and where did you build your bar chops? No, I know that's a long story, but
Yeah. So to kind of give you the background, when I was a little kid, my parents bought a restaurant. And so I basically grew up in a restaurant, and it was a place called Something Different in Indianapolis, Indiana, which became over time the most like critically acclaimed restaurant in Indiana. And so I grew up really in the fine dining side of things. And then 2001 came around, we had the dot-com bubble, we had 9/11. And let's just say I also learned how you can really lose money in the restaurant business. Because between all that, you kind of had casualization happening at the same time. Fine dining, 90s fine dining really died out between 2001 and 2004. And my parents were a victim of that. So I saw how to run one of the top restaurants in the country. And then I saw how to lose your ass running one of the top restaurants in the country. But because of that, as a kid, I had always I was 8 years old, and somehow the servers convinced me it was fun to fold napkins and polish glasses and stuff. So I was doing that as a little kid. And then afterwards, I said, okay, well, no hospitality, going to keep working in that. I ended up going to Purdue for hospitality there because I just didn't know what else to do. It's kind of like I've been doing this my whole life. So let's just keep going. Got out of college and I said, okay, I want to do something different. So I worked for Steak and Shake for a little bit, of all places. I said, well, I've done high end. Let's go do fast food. Very quickly learned I hate fast food. Just not my thing in any way, shape, or form. But that whole time I said, okay, I'm going to go buy a place. I was lucky. My dad had money. He was like, yeah, you want to go buy a restaurant or a bar? If I approve of it, I will loan you the money. Great.
Oh, sick. Yeah.
So I'm looking around, and what I had learned is I hate fast food, and fine dining is a great way to lose your ass. So I said, okay, what is probably the easiest way to make money? I said, well, heck, bars. People drink if the economy's good. People drink if the economy's bad. And if you're just kind of that neighborhood dive bar type spot, as long as you connect with your community, it's really not the hardest part of the food service business to be in by any means, right? So I was looking around. I found a bar in Indianapolis to buy. My dad was nice enough to loan me the money. But I tell people, because a lot of people, I was 22, I bought a bar, and they're like, okay, well, your parents must have paid for the whole thing. No, my dad loaned me money at 6% because he could borrow it at 3%. So he saw this as just I think you're going to be successful and I'm going to make money off of you thing.
Working the spread. Yeah.
Right. But so I had that bar for 7 years. So from 22 to 29, I owned that bar. In the process there, my dad had a bar with some partners. That one of them it just did not go well. One of the partners kind of was hiding money. So I ended up taking over that bar and getting that thing turned around as well. And so that was when I kind of owned bars. I had some family stuff. With the main bar I had some landlord issues. So that ended, unfortunately, due to landlord issues. And then I had some family stuff going on. My dad had cancer. My mom had died years before. So I had to take care of him. So I kind of got out of the industry for a little bit. And then kind of post-COVID, well, during COVID and for a while there, I was working for Intuit doing bookkeeping and managing bookkeepers, which is about as far away from bar stuff as you can get, like corporate tech, which was a nice change of pace. But I also realized I don't like corporate tech. I kind of gotten used to working for myself and hospitality people. So right after COVID, or shortly after COVID, got out of that and then got into bar consulting, which is what I do today, and podcasting and writing books and all that sort of fun stuff.
Cool. What a journey. Yeah. I did not, I knew but I was able to find most of it. I did not find the Intuit part. I don't think I heard that part ever.
Well, I don't put that on a lot of stuff because it's only tangentially applicable,
Sure.
right?
Sure. It's just interesting. So let's talk about that bar that you opened. So
Yeah.
I do remember you in the book saying that most people thought, I don't think this is going to go well. A young guy opening a bar. This is an industry that has a statistically high failure rate, and you actually ended up doing pretty well. So what did you do different?
So, well, I think the smartest thing I did was I was 22, right? I bought this bar. I think the youngest employee that worked there when I bought it was early 30s. So everyone was old. Everyone had been in the industry for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So I was young, inexperienced, and kind of by default, therefore, an idiot. And rather than say, hey, do all these things, because I knew if I said, hey,
I am the boss. Yes.
Yeah, they would just look at me and go, you're a fucking idiot kid, go away. So what I did is I went and I said, you know what? I'm an idiot. Teach me how you do your jobs. And so the first couple months, I made an effort to shadow every single one of my employees and essentially let them train me on what they do. And then slowly, because I had a plan of where I wanted to go. This had been an existing bar. It had been there 20 years. And it was a good neighborhood bar. There was nothing really structurally wrong with it at all. But like most 20-year-old bars, some things needed to be updated. So slowly I started, taking some posters off the wall or moving some mirrors or just not, I didn't do any major renovation, but just changed it enough to kind of make it a little nicer, a little more modern here and there. And then once I had let everybody kind of teach me what they did for a couple months, I started to institute small changes, like really small changes, right? Nothing huge, nothing that would shock anyone, nothing where I was going to get pushback. By working with them for months, I had learned what their pain points were, what they all thought, where they were worried. And so then I could kind of synthesize that and find just a little tweak here, a little tweak there. And it's one of those things. I had a guy on my podcast a couple of weeks ago that was going through the same thing. And he had the same experience. So I feel like a lot of people have had this where you tweak things just a tiny bit at a time, right? You just are slowly moving this needle on this old bar because you don't want to upset the regulars or anything. And a year later, you look down and you're like, holy shit, everything's different. How we serve is different. Our food is different. Our drinks are different. Like everything is different, but nothing changed quickly. And I think that's a piece where a lot of folks, when they like buy a bar, they get off the rails because they change everything so quick. The regulars are unhappy. The employees are unhappy. Nobody knows which way is up, and it just all crashes.
Yeah, they buy the neighborhood dive bar, and it's like, nope, we are a tiki bar now. And then 2 months later, when no one has come in, we go back to a dive bar, and it's just chaos, and you just go back and forth. I like that. I like that a lot. And it's very Atomic Habits, James Clear. Just small, steady progress is always more powerful. Compounds more than you
Mhm.
think long term. Yeah. I do like to, I want to kind of double click on what you were talking about shadowing people. One of the things you mentioned in your book that I thought was really powerful is the section about people kind of being beholden to their chefs, their kitchens, being
Mhm.
adverse to learning the back of house side of food production when they're an owner. And I could definitely see that. I haven't consulted with owners or anything, but a lot of people in, you know, the food and hospitality business, they're either front of house, back of house, and once you get on one side, you don't really cross. You can definitely get stuck, and there's definitely a lot of power in just being able to understand what they do. I'm wondering if
Mhm.
you could unpack that a little bit for me.
Yeah. So there's a couple different things here. So what I always tell owners is if someone works in your business and you don't know how to do their job, that's bad. Because what happens when they quit, right? The day and we all know in hospitality, 2 weeks notice happens sometimes. Fuck you, I'm leaving in the middle of Friday night happens often too, right? So
If
if
they
you
show up, yes.
yeah, right, if they show up, that's a great point. But so if you're an owner, especially, it's a little bit different if you have a big restaurant, right? And you have 10 people in your kitchen and 20 servers working at a time. Okay, one person quits or doesn't show up, everybody else can kind of come around. But when you think about a lot of bars, a lot of smaller restaurants, you might have, a bartender, a server, a guy in the kitchen. Well, if that guy in the kitchen walks, what do? Well, you either don't have food or you as the owner or manager know how to run the kitchen. It's kind of binary at that point. And
Mm,
so it's a really important, therefore, as an owner or manager, to be able to fill that spot when you need it. But B, how can you manage something you don't understand? Right? If I don't know what my chef does, if I don't know how to cook the food on my menu, how can I even begin to say, "Oh, I think we should change something"? Because you can't. And
yeah,
there's a lot. I feel like in both. Well, more. I was going to say both ownership and management, but really, this is more of an ownership issue. There's some arrogance that you'll see a lot where somebody goes, "Well, I had the money. I bought the business. It's my business. I can do whatever I want." Okay, technically, you can do whatever you want. But if you don't know how somebody works and what they do, and you tell them to do something different than how they do it, you're more likely to screw up their system than to help them out, right? Maybe learn and understand, be able to fill that spot when you have a hole, and then be able to actually understand what the people are going through so that you don't ask them to do things that are either outside their capabilities and you're or just like wrong. Because a
mhm.
lot of times people who you haven't worked a position, your idea is just unfortunately wrong.
Sure, sure. And on the flip side too, if what you think should happen, and they're saying it's impossible, you'll know too. It's
Yeah,
like, no,
absolutely.
this is definitely the way we should do inventory. Just trust me, we can.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Or, and I had a cook tell me that there's no way he could handle dinner by himself. I said, okay, I don't believe you. He
Hmm.
says, no, bullshit, you can't do it. I said, fine, go sit in that chair for the next 3 hours. So I'm in the chair. I ran his shift. I said, look, dude, I cook maybe once a month. Your whole job, your whole life has been cooking. If I can do it, you should be able to do it.
No, just my personal story of this was before I was general manager. Back when I did a stint with the restaurant group that I work with now in Omaha. I worked in their Tulsa location and I was their executive chef. 4 locations. It's like chainish, but just small.
Mhm.
And I was having trouble getting a broil guy because it's a steakhouse on Sundays. And one of the like younger guys, really, really good cook. Like I think he's still there, Diego. He told me that he was afraid to broil and they said it midweek and I was like, okay, well then I'll do it. And I did it that one Sunday and I never heard him complain that again because it was like this skinny white guy that doesn't know how to cook who's like really awkward. No, I'm not strong back of house. I've always been front of house. Filled a position when I needed to, but I'm just not strong. But yeah, he never complained again. He just was like, yeah, okay, I'll do Sundays then. It's like, yeah, cool,
Yeah.
good.
And again, as an owner, as a manager, you can't get your employees to do that unless you know how to do their job.
Hmm. Yeah. Have at least something backing that up,
Mhm.
something when you're directing. No, I did want to dig it. So it's towards the beginning of this book. And I think that this sums up a lot of what I'm sure you deal with when you talk to people about bars they run. I'm just going to quote it directly.
Mhm.
Your bar is not about what you like. No one besides you gives a shit about what you like, not your employees or your guests. What matters is what sells. The key is figuring out what the majority of your market wants. I feel like you have a really good handle on being very blunt, but not in a mean way. Just it, the book reads like you've dealt with a lot of questions. Let's put it that way. Put it gently there. So what do you find normally happens when people come to you? They're looking to buy a bar. Yeah, what do you see when you first start interacting with people?
Well, all sorts of things, right? I
Mhm.
mean, and if I'm real honest, about probably 50% of the people that approach me and they're like, "Hey, I'm looking to buy a bar. I want to start a bar, and this and this is that." My advice ends up being no.
You probably shouldn't.
Just
Yes.
don't do it. Right. And like, I even had somebody ask the other day, they're like, well, I think I might do a bar. It's a good investment. I think I can make some passive income. And I'm like, why don't you go buy an Airbnb? Like, literally, you want passive income? Go buy an Airbnb. Because that
Mhm.
bar, even, you're going to be working 100 hours a week for the
Mhm.
first year probably to get it where it needs to be. And even when you get it perfect, it's still going to take you 10 or 20 hours a week, assuming everybody shows up to work.
And you have
Right.
one drunk guest going and doing something stupid from a huge pile of mess. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you want passive income, don't buy a bar, don't buy a restaurant, right? But I think the point to that quote, and it's something I say a lot, which is what you said: nobody gives a shit what you like, because I think that's the easiest mistake to make, right? Is to assume I like X, therefore the public must like X, right? Because the bottom line is, you could just be freaking weird.
Sure.
I don't mean that in a
Yeah.
bad way, right? But people like weird stuff, and just because you like it doesn't mean anyone else does. Now
We've
that
all gotten used
doesn't
to
mean,
this with the internet. We could
yeah,
all find our tribe, and we're all not used to the fact that we actually kind of stick out a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now the flip side of that would be sometimes you like what everyone else likes. Like, let's be honest, if you want to open a sports bar because you really like football, okay, I'm not going to argue that one, right? You like football, you want your bar around football. Football and bars go together really well. But again, it always has to come back to where you are and who lives there. Because the deeper side of that quote that you read would be looking at things like demographics, looking at urbanicities, looking at, okay, if I have a bar or a restaurant that's aimed at Hispanic people, let's just say as an example, are there Hispanic people that live where I am?
Hmm. Yeah.
Right? Because if you open a bar that's, a Hispanic dance bar, which there are a lot of those around nowadays, but you're in a place that has no Hispanic people, well, you're not going to get any customers.
Mhm.
So it can be about what you like, as long as you're not weird and you like what everyone else likes. But short of that, it always has to be about urbanicity, who's around you, what kind of their spending behavior is, and what they expect. Because that's the other piece too. If you're in a more blue collar part of town and you have a quote dive bar, that's a heck of a lot different than being in a very white collar part of town and owning the dive bar, right? One dive bar is really a dive. One dive bar is probably nicer than every other dive bar in the city, but it's still a dive bar just
Yeah.
based upon who's around it.
The lights are just a little lower. Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How do you juggle that with there's another thing you say in the book about here, actually I just have it right here. Sometimes the right thing to do is what no one else is doing, but just make sure you're willing to withstand a hefty bet. So when do you know it's worth going for it?
Well, I'll give you a really good example from when I
Mm.
had my bar. So one of the things that happened with my bar, I bought it, it was a dive bar, like just straight up neighborhood dive bar, which was perfect. And that's when you could still smoke in bars. And I bought it in February of 2011. In 2012, there was a law now you cannot smoke in bars. So that shook my business to its core, right? And I said to myself, I said, well, I think the answer here is to move a little nicer and try to, because those guys that were smoking and chain smoking at the bar, they can't chain smoke anywhere inside, so they're probably still going to come in and they're just going to bitch about it. But the smoking kept away a higher end clientele. So I said, okay, I'm going to move a little bit higher end. And I went from a beer list where I think the nicest beer I had on was Fat Tire to a beer list that had, I went from 9 taps to 12. I had 6 rotating craft beers. I went from probably 15 beers in bottles to 75. Like, I just went all in on a bet that craft beer and better food is my answer with the smoking ban. And I was right. And so I pushed everything a little bit nicer. I made the food a little bit nicer. I just kind of kept pushing that way. Well, then, what would it probably be like 2014? The craze was starting to become aging cocktails in barrels.
And that was a different story, I think, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
so I dropped like $1,000 into this thing, or $1,500. I'm like, yeah, this is going to be awesome. And what I ended up with was a whole shit ton of Manhattans and mason jars in my fridge, like a bunch of them. And so there, I was trying to push the envelope again. I had already gone as far as I could, didn't know it yet. So I made the bet and I lost. But that's basically what I'm saying, right? So you can assume that you are right, but if you're going to assume you're right and there's not any evidence for it, just make sure you're not betting more than you can afford to lose.
Yeah, you bet $1,000, not 10,000 or
Right.
100,000. So yeah,
Right. And on the
for
craft
sure.
beer, I bet more like 5 or 6 grand because on the craft beer, I was pretty sure of myself at that point.
Sure.
2011 craft beer was getting hot, 2012. So I was pretty sure I was right there. And luckily I was.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of beer, I think your
Mhm.
section on understanding your costs, how far you dig into the cost on kegs was really illustrative of kind of the thought process you need when you go into bar ownership. The fact that you break down, a standard keg, they call them the half kegs, and
Mhm.
if you get 70% yield versus 95% yield in one week, you're going to make $1,200 less, and then do that math out, and what, I think it was 70 grand out of your pocket.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you talk to us about what is so important about beer yields, and just like kind of tie it in for the audience? Why is
Yeah.
running a bar so hard?
So when you think about bar service, right? What everyone always wants to talk about is, my bartenders are over pouring. And we're talking free pouring a cocktail, right? You're talking about maybe a quarter of an ounce. You do the math out on that, it's like a 5, 6% bump. It sucks, it's not good, but it's not that much. But then what people don't think about is, oh, this guy just left this tap open to pour beers and he just started putting glasses under it and half the beer went down the drain. Well, the thing is that's actually a much larger percentage of your keg. And so I think a lot of times kegs and it goes back to I think, the 80s, the 90s when kegs were just dirt cheap and people didn't care about keg waste. Where now, especially if you're getting into the craft beers, right, you can have $400 half barrels.
It's a
And you
different
better
thing, yeah, like Bud Light versus like rich double IPA. Yeah, that's
yeah.
a good point.
And so if you have a $400 half barrel, each ounce matters. And if your yield isn't there, you're going to lose money on it. And if you do that for a long time, you're not going to be in business very long, right? So I think draft beer ends up being neglected by a lot of folks because the assumption is still that it's just dirt cheap, which is not true. And because of that, we accept a lot more waste when it comes to draft beer in the industry than we ever should. And a lot of it comes down to the simple shit: training people how to pour a beer. That is the 90% of your problem is solved when it comes to keg yield by just training people how to pour a beer. It's amazing how little that happens and how many people, how many bars do you sit in and they're filling a pint and they're just letting the foam and the beer just pour off the side because it's a little foamy.
Almost every bar, yeah.
Yeah. And that's just from an ownership perspective, at least the way I always looked at it, that's just, I might as well be taking my money and throwing it into the sink and letting it go down the drain because that's the same exact thing.
Yeah, the guy who's cutting up the steaks and just cuts a little extra off and throws it into the trash.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think part of that is the fact that kegs are so out of the view? You can't see into the kegs. You can't see how low they're going. The foam goes down a drain. Whereas, like, you have this, everyone focuses on that over pour because you pour it into a glass. And it's like
Yeah.
if the glass is there, you see it, like, it's there.
I think that's probably psychologically some of it.
Hmm.
And I also think some of it is just what is a half barrel, right? I mean, a half barrel is huge. It's metal, to your point, you can't see in it. And full, I think they weigh like what, 160 pounds or something like that.
My back would say that's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, on a liquor bottle, especially you get something like I don't know, Sky Vodka, because that's almost a perfectly cylindrical bottle, right? You can point your tenths out on that, no problem. A keg, when you're doing inventory, what do? You pick it up, you swish it a little bit, and then you pull a number out of your ass.
.8 seems reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So from a management standpoint, as far as like being able to track and capture that waste and quantify it, it's harder with kegs, right? And a lot of it goes to your point where you don't have the visibility in the glass, you don't have the visibility in what's getting wasted, you don't have the visibility in the container it's coming from. But again, I mean, I think everybody loves draft beer, but if you're running a great draft program and you're not making any money doing it, why?
Yeah. You could have just stayed at home and not had all this
Yeah,
headache. Yeah, just not wasted all this money.
exactly.
So I think we would probably be missing something big if we didn't talk about what I am going to call intentional waste. I think you refer to as a theft. Definitely something that any bar owner would need to address. So, as a bar owner, tell me about theft.
Well, so theft is one of those things. I think I say in the book, I forget exactly how I phrase it, but I say something along the lines of at some point or another, every employee is going to steal from you. And it's kind of an issue of quantifying how much is okay. And I don't mean that in a bad way, right? I'm not saying that every server, every bartender is a terrible person. All your managers are terrible. No, by no means am I saying that. What I am saying is, I, as a bartender, have never not given my really good regulars that tip fat a little over pour, right? We all do that. We all sometimes give a free drink to a really good regular. We all maybe go back and grab some fries out of the basket, right? Like some of that is just inherent in the business. And so every time I talk to people about theft, I like to point that out first because you're not going to stop all of it. So A, don't really try, but B, don't get mad at your folks because they do it, right? Like understand a little bit of what some people are going to call theft is kind of par for the industry. But then you have theft that's, like the wonderful stuff where your cooks are throwing your full wrapped cryovac steaks into the trash can.
I wanted to talk to you about that. Yes.
So they can take them out back and throw them in the dumpster, and then their buddy can come by and grab them out of the dumpster, and now they have a bunch of free steak.
Mm-hmm.
And things like that are going to happen, right? I will say from a manager perspective, for everybody that's a manager out there, one of my favorite things, and I've done this 2 times in my life, is when you know someone's stealing, just to have them arrested in the middle of their shift. It's really harsh and it's kind of weird, but it also makes a heck of a point. So that's kind of a manager thing that I've pulled out on occasion. But really, if you think about it, theft is going to come from 2 main places. Well, 3 places, really. A, your employee just likes to steal. Which, okay, there are people that are kleptos. I think that's going to happen.
You got a bad egg. Yeah.
Right. The second one is that person has some sort of something going on in their life that they can't handle, right? They have some sort of financial situation. They're in a bad spot. Well, maybe rather than getting up their ass about theft, you should try to figure that out and work with them a little bit. And then the other place theft is going to come from is just ignorance, right? A lot of things that we call theft is really poor training. Right? Because if you think about wasting product as theft or giving away free drinks as theft, if you never told your bartender, hey, you can't give people free drinks, that's on you as the manager or owner, not on the bartender, because you didn't tell them they can't. So that's poor training, not theft.
For sure.
But I think with theft, I mean, in general, if I'm advising a manager or an owner, it's, hey, be nice about it, right? Hey, look at people's situations, make sure that it actually is theft. At the same time, if somebody steals from you and you know it, I'd see how quickly they got out the door.
Yeah, for sure. I think my favorite places to work, and I feel like the one I have now is like this. I've been the places that have some sort of system in place for, how to communicate with the house and how to get those regulars their drinks purchased. Like I've worked at bars where you get one a night that you get to designate, and it's just put it on the list, make sure it's accounted for. I love those situations because there's no ambiguity. You've got the ability to take care of the regular, but you also are accounting for it. I mean, anyone who's listening that works with me would know that as long as you come to me, I don't think I've ever said no to someone unless it's been a truly absurd request, but they come to me and they are really awesome. Can I get them dessert? I don't even think about it. I'm just absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because we're in the business of taking care of people, and but I also, my bonus comes off the profit that we get. So I want to make sure that the food costs and liquor costs look good because I want to keep getting that bonus. It's a big part of my pay.
Whether you're a manager doing it for your bonus or you're an owner doing it for your money to live on, it's always a trade-off. Mm-hmm. And I think, particularly if we're just talking about comping things for regulars, you got to be a little bit tight. Right? You can't just comp everybody every day. But if you never comp anyone anything, the guy down the street's going to, and they're going to go be his regular.
Yeah. And there's a difference between Joe who comes every day, buying him a drink every Tuesday, versus Joe who comes every day, it's his birthday, let's get him his meal today. There's high impact, low frequency ways that you can really stand out, those celebrations, the important days in their life. So yeah.
Well, and I had a regular, we bought him a bucket of beer every Sunday because he was an old guy, nice guy, came in for a bucket of beer every day, and we buy his bucket of beer every Sunday because every Sunday morning he would come, he would get mad because he was one of the first people in the bar. And he would get mad because Saturday night it would be crazy and there would be all these cigarettes on the sidewalk. So he just started this thing where on Sunday morning when he came in, because he was pissed about the cigarette butts, he would bring his leaf blower and blow them all off. So he just did that one day. I'm like, okay, now I'll give you a free bucket of beer. And next thing I knew, he would clean my sidewalk every day, and then my payment was a bucket of beer, and that worked for us. So
Yeah.
yeah.
If you look at the cost of beer, that's a pretty good deal, I'm guessing, unless it's like craft brews or something.
No, this guy was straight Bud Light.
Yeah, easy.
It worked very well for me. I was happy with it. He was happy, and yeah, giving something away, but it was a good trade.
All right. I think in the little bit of time we've got left,
Mhm.
I thought we could do a thought experiment. I wanted to pick your brain. Imagine
Okay.
I wanted to open a bar. How
Yeah.
could I make sure I didn't fail? Kind of give you free reign. Ask me any questions you want, and let's just see what we can do.
Well, the first question I would ask you is, okay, you want to open a bar. What kind of bar?
Okay. I would probably want it to be divey-ish. I wouldn't want to go full dive.
Yeah.
Just so in my vision there, it's a little more relaxed. If
Hmm.
I'm making nicer cocktails, or things that are like pre-prepped, pre-mixed so that it's quick, wham bam, goodbye. Probably 30 to 40 people at a time. Just like little
Okay.
hole in the wall spot.
So we're talking hole in the wall. We're talking inexpensive drinks. If you're
Mhm.
batching, quick service, the ability to do pretty good volume quickly, right? Like you can burn through that stuff, especially if you're pre-batching. So
Mhm.
like that all sounds good. So then I would say cool, because again, a lot of people that's about as far as we get.
Oh, sure.
And I'm like, oh yeah, that's not
Never
a good idea.
never
But no,
thought
that
about we were
idea
actually
works.
doing this. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So that actually works. And then generally I would ask people their experience, but I know you've been a manager, you've worked in the industry, right? So we're good there. The next thing I would ask somebody that wants to get in the industry is, well, how are you going to pay for it?
Ah, yes, the big bugaboo. I've got some money. I don't got much.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what most people say. And then my response is, well, if you buy the building, the bank will loan you money for the building, but that doesn't help you with the bar. If you go to investors, they're going to say hospitality is stupid and tell you to go away. So that's not going to help you. So then we're to what a lot of people would call your triple Fs, which are family, friends, and fools. And the easiest of the family and friends, you want to be careful, right? You don't want to get your whole family and friends involved and then screw it up. So that fools group is sometimes the easiest to go to.
Fair enough.
And so if you can find private investors that want to have the ego of I own a bar, great. Like that's kind of who you're looking for. But what I would tell most people is you're a lot of people go, hey, I've been a bartender forever. I'd love to own a bar. Boom. Okay, great. But how much skin can you put in the game?
Yeah.
Because even if we're talking a small neighborhood dive bar, right? And let's say we're not talking a major city, or we're talking suburbs outside of a major city, you can still buy one of those for a couple hundred grand, 2, 3, 400 grand in most places. But if you're going to investors and you're saying, hey, I found this bar to buy, it's $200,000. I need to raise 250 so I can pay for that and have operating capital. The first question every investor is going to ask you, even the family, the friends, and the fools, they're going to say, well, what's your skin in the game? And so one of the sad realities when it comes to basically bar ownership, because the banks aren't going to lend for this much. And, it's not like a startup tech company where you can find some VC to give you $1 million for no freaking reason. You got to be able to put some skin in the game. So if it's a $250,000 deal, you better be coming up with 100,
Cool. Okay.
right? And you're showing people, hey, I'm in this, I'm involved, it's my money.
I'm not going anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think, and I don't know if you've ever run into these, but I've known a couple people over the years who were like serial bar and restaurant openers. They would get a bunch of money and just go open a place, fail, and then just do it on repeat. I'm not quite sure how they pulled that off. These guys were like brilliant salespeople, obviously. But one of the big red flags when you see those guys is they never have skin in the game.
Yeah. If they could do it, maybe I can.
Yeah. I mean, look,
Anything's
people can
possible.
pull it off. I can't advise you on how to do that, A, because I think it's a little immoral, and B, because I just don't even understand how they get away
Yeah.
with it. But
Well,
it is doable.
I mean, it is kind of a concept in the self-help world, and I've found it to be true. My personal story. So I was working to fix my health. I used to be a smoker, gave it up 2021, and I paid about a year and a half in advance to run the marathon. And I swear that $100 that I put in, that knowledge that part of my money was going to be lost if I didn't train, was it was more helpful than anything I've ever done, because I already I mean, I used sunk cost fallacy against myself, and I actually went, I had skin in the game. I'd already paid $100. So I exercised for a year. I actually ended up running it. Did not get a good time, but I ran it.
Yeah, but you ran it and you finished it,
Well,
right? That's what counts.
Ran is a strong word. There was some definite walking in there, but I went through it. Yes, yes.
It's funny. I was talking to a guy that bought a bar, and I said, yeah, based upon all your experience, what's the one thing that stood out to you, and the one thing you think people should know if they're trying to get in? And he said, go all in. That was his advice, and I'm like, I'm not sure. I think that's the best advice in the world because you just told people leverage yourself so that if it fails, you fail as a person.
Hmm.
I'm not sure that's always smart, but it gets to that mentality you're talking about, right? Where when you're so on the line, and yeah, you can do it with $100. You don't have to risk your whole life on it, but you need to have to really treat a business properly. You almost have to be all in to the point where your life is going to be significantly worse if it closes, because then you constantly have that motivation. Let's make it work. Let's figure it out. And then, it's not you're sitting there and you're going, oh, I worked 40 hours this week. I just don't care anymore. It's I worked 40 hours this week. I got nothing done. I got to do another 40.
Yeah, and there's almost a protective measure of if I don't try my hardest, I can always tell myself that if I just tried harder, it would have worked. But
Yeah.
might as well just make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I have the money. What's next for me?
What's next is if you're buying a spot, that becomes pretty simple, right? You get with the broker, you get an attorney, you go through the documents, boom, done. If you're starting a spot, what's next? And this is something a lot of people miss. Hire an architect.
Fair.
And people miss it because they go, "Oh, it's just a bar. I can do all the renovations myself." Yeah, maybe, but with bars, and I'm sure you're aware of this, you have weird things like gap drains. So all your sinks have to have a gap, and then you have a floor drain that actually collects it and moves out. Well, if you have to put floor drains in a building, most strip malls and things, most commercial buildings, they're going to be concrete floors. So now you're going to have to get a jackhammer and jackhammer up the floor, which A is expensive, and B, if you jackhammer in the wrong freaking spot,
Is really
that's just not
expensive.
cool. Yeah, right. So get an architect, right? Make sure
Mhm.
that because they're going to know the codes for health code, they're going to know what can go where. They're going to also pay attention to things like amperage on circuit breakers and how many volts you're running to different pieces of equipment, right? Because especially when we're talking equipment, you're going to have a lot that's 110, you're going to have a lot that's 220, you're going to have a lot of things that require special circuit breakers or multiple circuit breakers for one piece of equipment. And you have to be real careful how you stack that all together. Because luckily, you don't see this too much anymore. But I have been in bars that are like, old houses where, oh, if you turn on the microwave, the lights turn off, right? You can't have that. And that's where that architect comes in really handy because I think anybody with experience, we can lay out the bar, but all that technical stuff, the wiring and the where the gas lines run and how the drainage should work, you need somebody that's trained on that. So that would be the next thing, get an architect. And then after that, get somebody to do the build out. Now that is where I'm not really as worried about it because there are restaurant build out folks. I'll tell you right now, they tend to be really expensive, right? Because they're like these specialized guys. There are also a lot of guys that are electricians and stuff that you can just put together a group and be your own GC and get it done a lot cheaper. But that's also going to depend on location, budget, local laws, all sorts of
And
that
your
stuff.
experience. And
Yeah. And then the next piece that I would throw out, if you are doing a bar, whether you're buying it or you're building it, make sure before you actually open your doors or before you actually sign that contract to take ownership, you have your server liquor license if you need one. You've taken all the liquor courses. You've done all the training. Because if you don't get all of that work, if you don't, know health code before you start and already do your serve safe and all of that,
there will never be
especially if you're
time.
buying a bar. Yeah, it ain't gonna happen, right? Because I'll do that once the bar is closed on. Well, shit, dude, you're working 100-hour weeks. You haven't seen your family for 2 months, and you're not sure if it's Saturday or Tuesday. And all you know is when I wake up, it's dark, and you don't know what time it is, or when I wake up, it's light because you just exist when it's dark, and the sun is a fun thing that happens sometimes.
Yep. And Fred and Sally just knocked the sink off in the bathroom, and oh God, yeah.
And so set yourself up for success by actually getting all of those pieces of knowledge that you need done before you sign the contract.
Perfect, awesome. Well, Chris, thank you for talking me through some of my dreams and maybe even talking me out of them. I'm sure it's what you do a lot.
That's I was joking with one of my business partners the other day, and I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not the best sales guy because I feel like half the people that call me, I convince them not to hire me and not to open a business versus saying, yeah, let's do it. But that's, in all honesty, I think anybody that wants to get into this business, anybody who's a bartender or a manager, they say, yeah, I'd really like to own something. Like, yeah, you might have experience, but really think through, is that actually what you want to do with your life? Or do you just like the way it sounds on paper and like what you imagine it is, and you're just have some pipe dream that's never going to come true?
Perfect. For those that are listening at home, where should someone go online to find some more of your stuff? Or
All over the place. The book I wrote, which you can see behind me right there, it's How to Make Top Shelf Profits in the Bar Business. That is on Amazon. You can also find my podcast. It's the Bar Business Podcast, barbusinesspodcast.com, Bar Business Podcast on YouTube, or any of the podcast platforms will have that. And you can find more about the coaching consulting side of what I do at barbusinesscoach.com. Search Chris Schneider and Bar Business.
it'll pop
I'll come up on everything.
Awesome. Well, for those of you listening, if you didn't have the ability to write that down, I will have those in the show notes. Chris Schneider, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a fun conversation.
Awesome. And I can't wait to come on your show and you can grill me about all the things I do and probably do wrong in the bar business.
Yeah.
Thank you again for listening. If you have not, please like, subscribe, and also leave a comment on this show. Every interaction is really, really appreciated. I respond personally to every message, comment I get. Episodes of this show come out every Tuesday, every week. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you.